Hello, listeners, and welcome to the first program in our series, Let's Learn Biology, which is produced for grade 10 and 11 learners and anybody else who has an interest in the subject. My name is Genre. Today we will learn about photosynthesis. Please have a pen and a notebook ready so that you can make notes of the important points. And remember to take part in the quiz at the end of the program. Just like other living organisms, such as animals, plants take in food to remain alive. However, unlike animals, plants do not obtain their food from other organisms. Instead, they manufacture their food by the process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is thus the process by which plants create the energy they require to grow. At the end of this program, you should be able to state the word and balanced chemical equations for photosynthesis, describe the synthesis of carbohydrates, and describe the effects of varying light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature on the rate of photosynthesis.
You know what, Esther? This watermelon is so sweet. I'm going to ask Mom if we can collect another watermelon from the garden.
I've enjoyed it too. But wait, where does the sugar in the watermelon come from?
I know. Plants make it. It's called fructose. It's not the only sugar plants make. They also make a sugar called glucose.
Glucose? I think I've heard about glucose before. Yes, in my biology class, they said glucose is a carbohydrate which green plants make during photosynthesis.
You're right, Esther. No wonder they say the word photosynthesis can be split up into two words. Photo, which means light, and synthesis, which means to put together. So plants use sunlight to make glucose. But come, let's go to Mom. Mom? Mommy? Esther and I would like to have another watermelon. Can we please go back to the garden and collect one?
It seems you children like watermelons. Yes, you can collect one more. Do me a favor and water the young plants in the plot next to the plot where the watermelons grow. Make sure you give enough water so that the plants will have adequate water to absorb in order to make the food they need to grow. You girls know I learned a lot about plants from the Grow Your Own Vegetables and Crops course that I attended last year.
Okay, thanks, Mom. Esther, let's divide the chores. Can you please pick the watermelon while I water the young plants? Mom said water is important to plants to make their food. I know from the lessons we had in primary school that plants also need sunlight and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
That's correct, Elena. I can summarize the process of making food in plants by writing here on the ground, using a chemical and a word equation. The chemical equation is 6CO2 plus 6H2O with sunlight and chlorophyll will give you C6H12O6 plus 6O2. While the word equation is carbon dioxide plus water, sunlight and chlorophyll gives you glucose and oxygen.
That's awesome, Esther. I can see that water and carbon dioxide are on the left side of the equation, while glucose and oxygen are on the right side of the equation.
That's right, Elena. The arrow separates the equation into the left and the right side. So the reactants, namely the things for the process to take place, are on the left, while the products, which are the things formed after the process has taken place, are on the right. Now let's go back home to Mom before she starts wondering why we are taking so long.
Mom, we're back. Look at the watermelon we brought. There are still a lot more in the garden. This season we really have a good harvest.
Okay, children, go and enjoy your watermelon. It is true that we have a good harvest this season. Do you know why, my children? I know. because I learned a lot about factors that can limit plant growth in the Grow Your Own Vegetables and Crops course I attended last year. When some factors, such as light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature, are readily available for plants, the rate of photosynthesis will increase. This means that plants will make more food for themselves and bear more fruit in return.
Mom, I know light intensity refers to how strong or how weak the light is. But does it mean plants make more glucose when the sun shines brightly than when the sun is covered by the clouds?
Yes, Esther, that's correct. As the light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis also increases, and that means more glucose is made.
Great! I have an idea about how we can make our watermelon plants produce even more fruits. We can erect a structure in our garden where we can hang light bulbs to supply our plants with light. This will ensure the light sources or bulbs shine brightly on the plants throughout the day. This will increase the rate of photosynthesis, which means more glucose for plants and more watermelon for us.
That's a brilliant idea, Elena. But remember, my child, there are other factors which are also needed to speed up the process of photosynthesis. Sometimes plants may lack other factors, and that will negatively affect the rate at which a plant can photosynthesize. For example, carbon dioxide concentration and temperature. An increase in light intensity increases the rate of photosynthesis only up to a certain point. Then, from that point onwards, even if you increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis will remain constant. This is because from that point onwards, light intensity is no longer a limiting factor, but the other factors, such as carbon dioxide concentration or temperature, might be limiting the process of photosynthesis.
Okay. So what will happen if I increase both carbon dioxide concentration and temperature?
Well, when the carbon dioxide concentration increases, the rate of photosynthesis also increases up to a certain point where carbon dioxide is no more a limiting factor, and then it becomes constant. The same principle applies in the case of light intensity, but I'm not so sure about temperature though.
That is correct, Esther. It's true for the factor of temperature as well. It is true for the factor of temperature as well, Elena. An increase in temperature will also increase the rate of photosynthesis up to the highest point. So at this point, the plant will be photosynthesizing as fast as it can. However, if the temperature is increased further, the rate of photosynthesis will decrease.
This is interesting and very important information for anyone who would like to start growing their own vegetables and crops or want to increase their harvest. But let me enjoy my watermelon.
Not so fast, Elena. Before I can allow you to enjoy your watermelon, I would like us to recap the process we talked about. Alright, number 1. Plants manufacture their own food during the process of photosynthesis. 2. They use carbon dioxide and water to form glucose. 3. The process requires an external source of energy, which is provided by sunlight. 4. Oxygen is released as a waste product. 5. An increase in light intensity, carbon dioxide concentration, and temperature increases the rate of photosynthesis up to a certain point. And last, further increase in temperature decreases the rate of photosynthesis.
And that brings us to the end of today's program. But before we say goodbye, here's your question for the day. Which raw materials are needed for photosynthesis to take place? A. Oxygen and water. B. Carbon dioxide and water. C. Oxygen and carbon dioxide. This program was written by Elizabeth Mukula. So until next time, take care.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Hello listeners, and welcome to the second program in our series, Let's Learn Biology, which is produced for grade 10 and 11 learners and anybody else who has an interest in the subject. My name is Mr. Hanganeni Levinewila, and today we will learn about homeostasis. Please have a pen and a notebook ready so that you can make notes of the important points and remember to take part in the quiz at the end of the program. At the end of this program, you should be able to define homeostasis, explain the concept of control by negative feedback, as well describe temperature regulation in ectothermic and endothermic animals. Enough of playing basketball, Thomas. Let's go home. Take this handkerchief and wipe your face. You are sweating a lot. Look, your t-shirt is so damp from all your sweat.
Yes, Dad. Do you know why I'm sweating so much?
No, please tell me.
It is because when I'm playing basketball, my muscles contract and relax a lot to allow me to run and bounce the ball. A lot of the heat energy is generated in my muscle cells. This heat energy can actually cause my body temperature to be higher than normal. So to prevent the body from becoming very hot, sweating begins, so that some heat energy is lost together with a little water passing out through the skin pores.
Really, son? It is true that so many physiological processes take place in our bodies every minute, and many of them I do not understand them fully. So the body has a mechanism for keeping its temperature within acceptable limits?
Yes, Dad. The mechanism is called homeostasis, a Greek word that says homeo means the same, while stasis means stable. So homeostasis means the maintenance of the constant internal environment.
That is interesting, son. But for now, you must go and take a shower. When you have finished, you should tell me how the internal body temperature is controlled when it is freezing cold outside.
Supper is ready. Where's Thomas? We should eat and go to bed. It's very cold today. I'm shivering.
Oh, yeah. Here he is now. Son, let's sit down and have our supper. We can continue with our discussion about the body temperature regulation. You spoke about the mechanism that helps humans to keep the body temperature within acceptable limits. How does this work when humans are exposed to very low temperature like tonight?
You see, Dad, let us take an example of Mom who is shivering because of the very cold weather. The weather temperature outside Mom's body, which is the external environment, is lower than her internal body temperature, which can result in a very dangerous situation for the body. To prevent a situation where the human body's internal temperature decreases below an acceptable limit, certain mechanisms kick in and actions happen in the body to prevent heat loss from the body to the colder environment. One of the actions employed to contract heat loss is to start shivering. Shivering is a simple, rapid contracting and relaxing of muscles. This process generates heat energy.
Does this mean this uncontrollable shaking I'm feeling in my body is a way to generate heat energy? How does this help me to become warm? But let's eat first. Food is getting cold.
Yes, Mom. Shivering causes your muscle cells to generate the heat energy, which rises internal body temperature to acceptable limits. When the body temperature drops because of exposure to very cold external temperatures. Say, for example, the temperature outside is 20 degrees Celsius. To avoid the internal body temperature to drop to the temperature, the body generates heat energy by shivering, so that the internal body temperature remains in the range of 37 degrees Celsius. That heat energy that the body generates keeps us warm.
But I feel warmer when I put on a jersey or cover myself under a blanket. Could that be because the heat energy which is being lost from the body is trapped inside the jersey or blankets?
Yes, you are right, Mom. The process of lowering and raising internal environment conditions to acceptable limits is called a negative feedback. Temperature is not only the only factor that must be regulated, Factors such as glucose, pH, water, and many others are also controlled through the negative feedback mechanism.
Wow, interesting. So the human body has this powerful mechanism to maintain a constant internal environment? Does the same explanation apply to other animals, for example, lizards?
That's a wonderful question, wifey. When I take a walk early in the morning when it's cold outside, I observe that lizards hardly move when I come close to them. However, they show very different behavior later in the day when the temperature becomes warmer.
Your observation is 100% correct, Dad. Animals like lizards cannot generate enough heat energy from their bodies. The regulation of their body temperatures depend on external sources. They get heat energy from external sources such as the sun or rocks to raise their internal body temperatures and stimulate their metabolisms. So, when external environment is cold, it means their body temperature also drop. And when external temperature is hot, they absorb the heat from the external source and their body temperature rise.
Oh, no wonder lizards and snakes are called ectotherms. They regulate their body temperatures by relying on external sources, while humans and birds are called endotherms because they regulate and maintain a constant body temperature, independent of the external environment. Let's go to bed. The later it becomes, the colder it gets.
Wait a bit. We had an interesting and educational conversation around the dinner table tonight. I want to check if I can remember everything we talked about. The maintenance of a constant internal environment is called homeostasis. The whole process of lowering and raising internal environmental conditions to acceptable limits is called negative feedback. Internal body conditions such as glucose, pH, water, etc. should be kept within acceptable limits. Humans and animals such as birds obtain heat energy from their bodies and are called endotherms. Snakes and lizards obtain heat from external sources such as hot rocks or the sun, and their body temperatures change in line with that of the external environment, that are called ectotherms. And this brings us to the end of today's program. But before we say goodbye, here is our question for the day. How do ectothermic animals such as lizards control their body's temperature when it's cold outside? A. They generate heat energy from inside their body. B. They go under the rocks and into crevices. And C. They bask in the sun. And this program was written by Elizabeth Mukula. So until next time, take care.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Hello listeners, and welcome to the third program in our series, Let's Learn Biology, which is produced for grade 10 and 11 learners and anybody else who's interested in the subject. My name is Jandre. Today we will learn about the structure of the human eye. Please have a pen and a notebook ready so that you can make notes of the important points. Also, do have a mirror or a partner to work with because the first part of our lesson will be practical. Please do take part in the quiz at the end of the program. Have you ever heard about the saying, the eyes are the windows to the soul? It simply means that you can tell what people are thinking or how they feel by looking into their eyes. Today's program will shed some light on the parts of the human eye and their functions. At the end of this program, you should be able to identify the structure of the eye, limited to the cornea, iris, pupil, lens, retina, optic nerve, and blind spot, and state the function of each part. Explain the pupil reflex in terms of light intensity and antagonistic action of circular and radial muscles in the iris. First of all, look into a mirror. This mirror can be handheld or fixed. If you do not have a mirror, look into your partner's eyes and let us identify the following parts and their functions. The iris. This is the colored part of the eye. It is at the center of the outer white part, called the sclera. The iris provides individuals with eye color, for example, brown, blue, etc. The function of the iris is to regulate the amount of light entering the eye. The pupil. This is the central opening of the iris, which is commonly referred to as a hole in the middle of the iris. It lets light into the eye so it can reach the retina. The retina cannot be seen when you look into someone's eyes. The cornea. This is a transparent or clear layer in the front of the eye which covers the pupil and iris. Its function is to help focus light by bending it as it enters the eye. Since the cornea is also transparent, you cannot see it in the mirror either. Now that you have identified all the visible parts, dear listeners, you can put away the mirrors or thank your partners for helping you in this practical activity. There are also other parts of the eye that cannot be seen in a mirror. As our program continues, we will deal with those other parts of the eye which cannot be seen when looking into a mirror or somebody else's eyes.
Hey Rauna, can you please take this video camera and capture me as I do the last rehearsal of my song? I'm going to perform at the concert tomorrow.
Anything for you, my friend. Wow, you have put up a great performance, my dear. Have a look at the video. Its quality is really good. This makes me wonder about how a video camera captures images. I heard people saying it works just like the eye.
Yes, a video camera and the eye have some features which are similar. For example, they both have lenses to focus light and sensors or photoreceptors to capture light.
Well, I know a camera has a lens and that the lens of the camera moves to stay focused on the object being photographed. How does the lens of the eye works?
You know what, Rauna? The lens of the eye is found just behind the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. It does not move like that of the camera, but it changes shape to bend the light so that it focuses it onto the retina where photoreceptors are found.
Oh, I know. Photoreceptors on the retina capture light from the object and change it into nerve impulses which go to the brain through the optic nerve. The brain then forms an image and makes sense of what is seen. Sometimes there is no image formed in the brain.
Yeah, I know why. They say that a certain part of the retina contains no photoreceptors or light-sensitive cells. This part is called the blind spot. So when light from an object falls on the blind spot, there will be no image formed in the brain because there are no photoreceptors which are responsible to change light into nerve impulses.
Really, you are the best. And I just love how we always share knowledge. One more thing which interests me is how the pupil changes its size. I have observed the eyes of my kid. During the day or when the light is so bright, the pupil appears smaller, but during the night, the pupil appears larger in size.
You've observed quite correctly. I remember what my biology teacher taught us regarding the change in size of the pupil. He mentioned that the change in the size of the pupil is called pupil reflex, and it's caused by the radial and the circular muscles of the iris, which work antagonistically. That means when one contracts, the other muscle relaxes.
I know that circular muscles lie in circles around the pupil. I think when they contract, the pupil constricts or becomes smaller. On the other hand, the radial muscles run outwards from the edge of the pupil. So when they contract, the pupil dilates or becomes larger.
Brilliant! We learn and grow together, my friend. But I have to go now.
All the best with your performance for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Dear listeners, as we conclude, remember, the eye has many parts, but we have only covered those which the syllabus prescribes for this level. I would like to highlight the different parts of the human eye and their functions, which you should know and understand well before attempting tests or examinations. The cornea bends the light as it enters the eye. The iris controls how much light enters the eye by adjusting the size of the pupil. The pupil allows light to enter the eye. The lens bends the light and focuses it onto the retina. The retina, where light-sensitive receptor cells which change light into nerve impulses are located. The optic nerve carries nerve impulses to the brain. The blind spot, where the optic nerve leaves the eye. No photoreceptor cells are found here. In addition, make sure that you are able to explain the pupil reflex as follows. In bright light, the circular muscles contract while the radial muscles relax, causing the pupil to become smaller. In dim light, the circular muscles relax while the radial muscles contract. This causes the pupil to become larger. And that brings us to the end of today's program. But before we say goodbye, here is your question for the day. Which part of the eye contains photoreceptor cells? A, the retina. B, the optic nerve. C, the iris. This program was written by Elizabeth Mukula. So until next time, take care.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Hello listeners, and welcome to the fourth program in our series, Let's Learn Biology, which is produced for grade 10 learners and anybody else who is interested in the subject. My name is Chandra, and today we will learn about cell division. Please have a pen and a notebook ready so that you can make notes of the important points. Except if you are an adult, you have probably noticed that you are much bigger than you were 5 years ago. Yes, you have grown. Have you ever wondered how growth occurs? The answer is cell division. I hope today's program will shed a little light on how cells divide by the process called mitosis. At the end of this program, you should be able to define mitosis, describe mitosis in terms of the exact duplication of chromosomes resulting in identical daughter nuclei, and state the role of mitosis. Hello Janet. Hello Marcus.
Hi, Linda.
Nice to see you after such a long time.
Hi, Linda. Nice to see you too.
Look at you. The two of you have grown. You're so much taller now.
You were also not that big when we did matric.
That's true. Let's just say we've all grown and are all attending varsity now. You know what? I miss high school. I remember that day when I didn't want to write a summary for biology and Miss Shaniwa stopped the whole class from writing except for me.
Yeah, then she made copies of your notes and gave each one in the class a copy. But you know what? Your notes were so clear, it actually helped me to understand how cells divide, especially by mitosis.
Wow, Janet, you never mentioned that you actually gained something from my punishment. It felt awkward and I was not very happy about writing while everybody else was not. Anyway, let's find a spot to sit down. Look, there are benches over there. We can take a few minutes to catch up with each other and you can tell me what you learned from my punishment. It might help me with my biology investigation.
Janet, tell us. I'm also so curious. Cells are living and therefore existing cells divide to form new ones. How did a punishment like that teach you about cell division?
Well, I linked the paper on which Linda wrote her notes to a cell, and then I linked the copying process to cell division. Finally, I linked the copies which were given to each learners in class to the new cells.
Wow, that is brilliant. Now, how can we explain mitosis using Janet's illustration?
I think I have an idea. But first, let's remind ourselves about the definition of the term mitosis. It's a nuclear division, giving rise to genetically identical cells. This means that the nucleus of the cells divides so that the two new cells which are formed are genetically identical to each other.
Wait, I know that the nucleus is where genetic information about the organism is stored. But how can a new cell contain the same genetic information as the original one? Unless the genetic information is copied first before the nucleus divides.
You two are absolutely correct. I hope you remember that genetic information found in human cells, for example, is called DNA. So the entire chain of DNA is stored in the nucleus, and this long chain of DNA is called a chromosome. So this chromosome is duplicated first, then the separated copies move to different sides of the cell, and then the nucleus divides, forming two identical nuclei. In short, that is how cells divide by mitosis.
Oh, now it makes a whole lot of sense. I had a wound that healed and left a scar here on my arm. But now one can hardly see the scar because it healed completely. It can only mean that the new cells must have been formed that replace the damaged cells.
You are right, Marcus. Cells divide by mitosis to help our wounds and scars to heal. In other words, mitosis plays a role in replacing worn-out cells and repairing damaged tissues.
It also plays a role in asexual reproduction. For example, bacteria reproduce by simply dividing into two.
I remembered one more role. Mitosis is the reason why we are all so tall.
By the way, Linda, you might need to remember the following for your biology investigation at varsity. 1. Mitosis is a nuclear division giving rise to genetically identical cells. 2. It involves exact duplication of chromosomes resulting in identical daughter nuclei. 3. It plays a role in asexual reproduction, replacement of cells, repair of damaged tissues, and in growth.
Thanks, Janet. This brings us to the end of today's program. But before we say goodbye, here's your question for the day. Which statement describes mitosis correctly? A. Exact duplication of chromosomes resulting in non-identical daughter nuclei. B. Nuclear division giving rise to genetically identical cells. Or C. Exact duplication of chromosomes resulting in identical daughter nuclei. This program was written by Elizabeth Mukula. So until next time, take care.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.
Hello listeners, and welcome to the 5th program in our series, Let's Learn Biology, which is produced for grade 10 and grade 11 learners and everybody else who has an interest in the subject. My name is Mr. Hanganini Levinewila, and today we will learn about monohybrid inheritance. Please have a pen and a notebook ready so that you can take notes for the important points, and remember to take part of the quiz at the end of the program. At the end of this program, you should be able to define the terms genotype, phenotype, homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, recessive. Good morning, class. Today we'll talk about a very interesting topic, monohybrid inheritance. While at the very beginning of this topic, I would like to ask any volunteer to tell us about his or her pet.
Me, sir. I have a puppy. She's a fluffy, black and tall animal. She's so cute, so I named her Cutie.
Well done, Amy. The description you gave us about your pet will help us to understand some aspects of monohybrid inheritance. Petra, your hand is up. What's the matter?
Yes, sir. I guess we are going to talk about how a single characteristic or gene, for example, hair color, can be passed on from parents to their offsprings.
You are right, Petra. From the word monohybrid, we can derive the word mono, which means one or singular. So it is about how a single characteristic or trait or gene is passed on from one generation to the next. Let's take the example of Amy's puppy. She said her puppy is fluffy, black and tall. All these are characteristics which the dog inherited from her parents. In monohybrid inheritance, the focus is on how one of these characteristics or genes is being inherited. You can imagine how complicated it can be trying to study at the same time how color and height are inherited.
Sir, talking about Cutie's height, for example, does it mean she is tall because one of her parents is tall?
Sir, let me try and answer that.
Please go ahead.
I think, just like any other offspring, Cutie got a set of DNA from her father and another set from her mother. On the sets of DNA that Cutie received, there are structures called genes. Therefore, both Cutie's parents passed on the gene for height to her. So Cutie's height is the result of the genes she got from both parents.
Yes, that's correct, Petra. Just remember, a gene can take different forms. We can refer to different forms of genes as an allele. It is the allele that determines the physical outcome. Like in Cutie's case, being tall. Cutie turned out to be tall. This could mean that she inherited the tall variation of the gene of height from one of the parents or from both of them. And that is why she is tall and not short. This then brings us to the definition of the term phenotype. Phenotype is defined as the observable features of an organism.
So, what you're trying to say is that, for example, in Cutie's case, features such as fluffy, tall, and black are phenotypes?
Yes, that's correct, Petra. Class, let us now look at the definition of the term genotype. Genotype is defined as the genetic makeup or the set of genes of an organism in terms of the alleles present.
Aha! I now understand that my puppy is tall because of the type of genes she inherited from her parents. And these genes she has are what we call genotype.
You are such intelligent learners. Now, I would like to see if you can define these two terms, homozygous and heterozygous.
Let me give it a try, sir.
Please go ahead.
Homozygous refers to having two identical alleles of a particular gene. When we construct monohybrid crosses, we use the letters of the alphabet, such as capital letters T or small letters t, to represent the alleles. So if Cutie's alleles are both capital letters TT or small letters TT, That's what is referred to as being homozygous. On the other hand, if cutis alleles are one capital letter T and one small letter t, this is what is referred to as being heterozygous.
Could it possibly be that the word hetero means different while homo means the same?
Yes, Petra. What a brilliant deduction. But sir, if an organism can have two different alleles of a particular gene, which allele then determines the characteristic of the organism?
The dominant alleles determines the characteristic of the organism. It means the dominant allele is the allele that is physically expressed. The allele which is not expressed when the dominant allele is present is called a recessive allele.
Sorry, sir, I don't understand. If we choose the following alleles to represent cutis genotype for her height, one capital letter T and one small letter t, which one is dominant and which one is recessive?
Okay, let us say the capital T represents tallness, while the lowercase t represents shortness. Ami told us that her puppy is tall. So we can conclude that the allele of tallness, which is represented by a capital letter T, is a dominant over the allele of shortness, which is represented by a lowercase letter t. Since the dominant allele effect is visible in the phenotype of an organism.
I see. It's so clear now. So the dominant allele will be expressed in the phenotype if it is present, while the recessive allele will only be expressed in the phenotype when the dominant allele is absent. Okay. Can I please summarize what I learned today?
Of course, go ahead.
All right. I've learned that genotype refers to the genetic makeup of an organism in terms of the alleles present. 2. Phenotype refers to the observable features of an organism. 3. Homozygous refers to having two identical alleles of a particular gene. 4. Heterozygous refers to having two different alleles of a particular gene. 5. Dominant refers to allele that is expressed if it is present. And lastly, recessive refers to an allele that is only expressed when there is no dominant allele of the gene present.
Job well done, Petra. And that brings us to the end of today's program. But before we say goodbye, here is our question for the day. Which term refers to having two identical alleles of a particular gene? A. Genotype. B. Phenotype. C. Homozygous. And this program was written by Elizabeth Mukula. Until next time, take care.
The Education Radio Initiative is possible with support from the Ministry of Education as part of the Education and Training Sector Improvement Program.